Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. Have an amazing lineup here. Super excited to interview Justin. But before we dive into that, don't forget to tell us if you're enjoying these shows, like, comment, share, all that fun stuff. Give us a subscribe. But today, the most important part is our guest, Justin. So Justin is a man of many talents. And today we're going to talk about his amazing content creation skills, audio, visual, and written. Justin has made a career from creating amazing content for his huge follower base and massive companies like Orbitz, Expedia, Discovery, Shark Week, BeondTV, and KTLA, just to name a few. So let's dive in and find out how Justin builds engagement, audiences, and amazing content. So Justin, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. It's been a long time coming to sit on your podcast. I feel like I've finally made it now, Jack.
I finally got you here.
We've been trying for a long time, and I think back to how we originally connected over Instagram years and years ago, where I stalked you and Jen, your photos in the Philippines. And then I chatted with Jen for months on planning this trip. And then afterwards she said, if you're ever in LA, you should come say hi. And I said, what? I live in LA. And then we realized we lived a mile apart from each other, and we've been friends ever since. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to dive into a lot of this because
Yeah.
I think you're one of those people who is just so good at creating engaging conversations,
Thank you.
having an amazing vibe around an audience, and creating just really good content. So I
Thank
think there's
you.
lots that everybody can learn here at how to be literally just better at creating content, better on camera. Because I know that's one of people's biggest fears. So let's go all the way back. And
Sure.
how did you get started with content creation, whether it was for TV or social? Where did you all get started? What was kind of like the first stepping stones of how you kind of started this career?
Yeah, the first thing, if I go way back, is I became obsessed with the TV show Survivor as a kid. And I created game show weekends for my family and friends. And then when I was doing that, I was like the Jeff Probst running the games and also hosting them. And I just loved being on camera. I loved entertaining and I loved creating things. So then that became a hobby where I created these games. And at the time, I didn't even realize I was doing content or creating experiences. And so then I did all that as a hobby in high school and college. And then I went to school for political science, and I thought I was going to become a lawyer, but all of my electives were in kind of content creation in terms of broadcast writing or traveling and all of that. And it wasn't really a career at the time to be a quote unquote content creator. So when I moved to LA, I started, doing various kinds of content creation, like you said, different platforms of television, of digital, and in many spaces of entertainment. And in the last 6 years, I've really honed in on the travel space. And that is where I'm really passionate about. I'm just everything I want to do revolves around travel, adventure, and creating content, whether it's me on camera, behind the camera, writing, or engaging in conversations. I am just obsessed with travel, adventure. So that's where all of my content creation kind of stems from nowadays.
And I know, travel is pretty, I would say everybody loves to be in travel. It's a really exciting thing to make content around.
Yes.
So you've been doing it for a while, and I know you've got some amazing videos, and you've done your around the world. I think it's in 80 seconds. How do you sort of compete with all these other influencers, and how do you make your content better than other people's? Because it's all about obviously getting that engagement, getting the people to like your content. So what are a few tips you have for people trying to create content in competitive spaces?
I think my biggest tip is one I just actually learned this weekend when I was on an Insta Meet trip with a company called Travel Mindset. I've done a lot of work for them. And we were in Zion, Greater Zion, and we were a group of Instagrammers. And I love going on these trips because you're just always learning about the space, and even as long as you can be in it. So my biggest tip right now that I'm even learning is you have to be willing to adapt to the changing platforms. And this is something where it was kind of a little eye-opening experience for me this weekend. I have known for so long that Instagram is moving towards Reels. This is an example of Instagram. Instagram is moving towards video content and Reels, and to be more like TikTok. It's just, that's the evolution of where that platform is going. And most of my work and most of my travel content creation in the quote unquote influencer space has been through Instagram. And it really was an eye-opening experience for me this weekend, recognizing I need to change how I'm sharing my content, less photos, less long form videos, and doing it more in a way that's keeping on trend with where the platforms are going. So number one, being adaptable, being willing to change the way you present your content, and also having those conversations with people where you're learning from them and growing from them, and almost figuring out how you need to kind of evolve and change. I would say if you asked me that question 5 years ago, it was more of produce the highest caliber content and make sure it stands above the rest by having it be really well produced, telling a great story. And that's what I really I'm almost, I would say, a little bit of a classic content creator. Whereas coming from the background of working on platforms of digital and media and television, a lot of my background is in storytelling in a different way than the TikTok version of storytelling. So I'm in almost like after this weekend in a little bit of I need to change up my game to keep on with everything that's been changing on these platforms. But I think the biggest thing is, and I'm sure many people have said this, is if you are passionate about your content, you're passionate about what you're doing in your content, you're surrounding yourself with passionate people and like-minded people, then that hopefully will translate into quality content that stands out, and not being afraid to try and either tell the story in a way that is really in your voice and not just doing it because other people are doing it. So if I can combine and meld those two thoughts, it would be, I understand that I have to shift the way I'm delivering my content on social media, but I still want to do it in a way that it still rings true to me and that I'm not just copying, everyone else on what they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I think now more than ever, because of the rise of TikTok, this is becoming evident.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are jumping over to TikTok are seeing early success because it's a new platform.
Yep.
And the success on TikTok doesn't have anything to do with how successful those people were on YouTube or Instagram or any of those things. It's really just like, how do you adapt to what the consumer wants? And then if you do that, you'll get rewarded.
Yeah.
So very interesting how that's changing. But actually, one question I do want to ask you about, because I know a lot of listeners, they don't really know how to get started with, becoming an influencer or an Instagram or a TikToker or YouTuber. But one of the ways that you can do this is doing these kind of like collaborative trips. How do these Instagram trips or collaborative trips work? And then how do you kind of get on these?
Yeah. So I actually got my start in the quote unquote influencer game or world through blogging. And that's where I did a couple of things. I did blogging where I did a blog for about a year without any opportunities or any brand deals or anything. And I just was creating blog content. And then also at that time, I was a host of a Survivor after show where I would watch the TV show Survivor. And then I would do podcasts like this, where we would dissect the game and we would talk about the show. And through that and my travels, it kind of grew my Instagram following. And then once I had a blog going and an Instagram account going, then I was able to get invited to press trips, invited to these opportunities where brands or tourism boards were asking me to go to locations and create content for my personal channels and their personal channels. And it started kind of being a snowball effect. So in terms of getting started, I don't necessarily know if a blog is the way to do it anymore, because we were even joking this past weekend with this bunch of Instagrammers and TikTokers and content creators and influencers that we were all saying like, no one reads blogs anymore. Like the attention span people have to consume content now is so much shorter and smaller because of the rise of a TikTok and because people want, 7 seconds or less. You got to grab them or they move on and they're swiping and they're swiping and they're swiping. So even how I write my blogs, I've changed. I write my blogs more like every blog is a list. Everything is like, some sort of list with easily digestible things and, blogs that are itineraries as well do well in addition to lists. But yeah, I would say getting started, what somebody told me when I was trying to get into this was you just have to be creating content. You have to do it for a while and without getting that tourism board or without getting that brand approaching you. And the more content you are building, that's good quality content. I always think high quality, smart, good quality content will stick out over a long period of time. And even one of the Instagrammers who's really successful, Hey Sierra, who I got to know this weekend, she's really great at what she does on both Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. She was saying, and I agree, you have to kind of have it's not a resume, but it is a resume of content that exists before brands and tourism boards are going to want to work with you. And a lot of times that doesn't just get you a following right away. So it's always changing, it's always evolving, and at the end of the day, it does take hard work. It's a lot of work, and I think that is one thing that we always joke about with my friends who are Instagrammers or influencers or writers, whoever is in the travel space. And you could always say this into other genres as well. It is work, and I'm not complaining about it being work, but it takes a lot of work. And that is, if you're not willing to put in the time, the energy, the investment of the work, then you probably might not see the results unless you do randomly go viral on some quick video and then you gain a huge following from that. But most people are not gaining followings or opportunities by just one viral video that then sets them up for the rest of their work. It's all the people that I'm meeting are the people that have done it for a while, and then after they do it for a while, they start seeing success.
Yeah. That's the thing, there's no such thing as overnight success. It's, 5 years of work.
But it's very rare.
And then you see the overnight success. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, how did you conduct your first 10,000 followers on Instagram? Was it from the Survivor stuff?
I think it was mostly from the Survivor stuff. So a lot of my following grew from doing that podcast, and that it was a podcast very, like I said, very similar to this, where I was putting out my travel content and I was also hosting the Survivor show. And that's where I started gaining the traction, was through doing the podcast, doing the show, and doing on-camera work. I also hosted local Los Angeles television shows where I did 3 different outdoor adventure travel shows in different spaces in Los Angeles. I did a What's Good talk show with my very good friend Amy Paffrath, where we interviewed people who are doing good in the world and talked about good news stories from around the world. So I had a lot of different hosting and on camera and content creation in the sense of being the person in front of a camera. That was a little more traditional in television and digital, but I was doing that at the time when social media started growing. I was doing those opportunities where the idea of Instagram or the idea of Twitter and that was starting to gain traction. So it was much more easier to use those platforms to then meld a following, where it is a lot harder today to do that, because like you said earlier, so many people are trying to do this. So many people are trying to be content creators. I think when kids are asked nowadays, what do they want to be when they grow up? The number one thing is a YouTuber. It's probably now a TikToker, whereas it's very different from what we grew up with. And so it's the space is becoming, and it has every year just more and more saturated. So I think one thing that's helped me continue to do this type of work is relationship building. And I think that is one thing that gets lost sight of in terms of followers and followings and numbers and analytics, is quality relationships, and building those relationships makes a difference. I used to be a part of a group in Los Angeles that I also became a part of this group because of Jen, your wife, Travel Massive. Jen, after I met her after that Philippines trip, she told me, you need to go to these travel networking events. So I would go to these monthly travel networking events in Los Angeles we did it for a couple years, where we were making connections with fellow creators and then brands and tourism boards. And through those networking events, I created relationships with brands and tourism boards and people. And then down the line, those can pay off. One, for example, that a lot of people ask me, I went on a trip to the islands of Tahiti from in the end of 2020 into 2021. I went on a press trip to the islands of Tahiti. Tahiti is one of the most revered and wanted to go to and desired expensive locations, right? And there's ways to do it more affordable. But I met the tourism contact 3 to 4 years before I even went on that trip. And we just stayed in touch as contacts, and not with the idea of, it was a real relationship that we built. And it was, when the opportunity comes along and I can think of you or try and put you on a trip, I will. in those 3 years, there were a lot of press trips and opportunities of people going to Tahiti. Did I take offense that I wasn't one of them? No, but I just maintained a relationship and a contact with them. And now look at that was 2 years ago. We're bringing Shark Week to Tahiti, and partially that is due. It's also it comes together, right? It's these relationships. So part of that is Shark Week is going to Tahiti for the first time ever in its over 35 years. And part of that is because of my connection and the host, Kinga Phillips, who I host multiple travel shows with and do content with. She and I are bringing Shark Week to Tahiti through a show she's hosting through this relationship we have with the tourism board. So it is a full circle thing where I think we can talk about analytics, we can talk about numbers, we can talk about all the things like how long your TikTok video and Instagram video should be and how much text you need to put on it, X, Y, and Z. But don't lose sight of relationship building with real people and real connections, because that does go a long way.
Yeah, I think there's so many learnings from that just then. So, one, niching down to get your first initial audience.
Yes.
Two, you need to have good quality run of your resume, of your content before a brand or a tourism board will even look at you.
Yeah.
Three, go to these events, make sure that you're making these connections with these types of people and understand it's a long-term game. And then four, don't forget to keep in contact with those people, because as you said, that's crazy how long it took for that to happen. But the outcome of that, when you look back, is massive compared to anything you could have done on such a short period of time. And trying to put together a whole trip, not having any connections, and also not having any opportunities from having no contact in Tahiti, for example. That just wouldn't have happened. So
I honestly can say that Tahiti example is a situation where a lot of these opportunities would not have happened because of the personal connections and relationships that myself and Kinga Phillips and other people that I don't need to go into. But it's all, like you said full circle. It does come full circle. And sometimes it is patience and timing.
Yeah, well, even I'm sure the collaboration side, with these, Instagram or content creator trips, even those relationships are a good place to start, because I do notice that when you have TikToks or Instagram or any type of content where there's multiple people in there that both have a following, you do seem to get a little bit more traction, because you have two audiences engaging versus just one. So that's also a good point, good place to start, I would say.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's interesting about social media is you have all these content creators creating content individually on their own brands and platforms. Every time I go on these trips that are multiple people, the outcome versus a solo trip is so much more amplified, because you're in that community, you have a shared experience, you love that shared experience. And then now I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new friends on social media through this last trip I did at Greater Zion. And now I'm seeing their content and I'm engaging with them and I'm excited to see what they put from the trip. And it's a really exciting kind of energy. And that I've been to Zion twice previously before this trip with the same company, Travel Mindset. And before this is going to make me sound like a nerd, but before I went, I was on the airplane going through old photos for my first Zion trip and my second one. And I was listening to my favorite artist, Ben Bomer. If you haven't listened to him, check him out. But I started getting teary-eyed from the memories from those trips. And if that connection of those like relationships and the experiences I've had, and then going into a third time at Zion, and then I came back with just as powerful of an experience, then those brands, I want to do whatever I can for those brands and perform well for them and do beyond my required deliverables that I have to do, because I had such an amazing experience with them.
So that's another thing, like long-term relationships with brands. Like, don't just think of it as a one and done experience.
Yes.
Make sure that you also create win-win scenarios. Because I think in the influencer game, so I've got a bit of experience from both sides, the brand side and the influencer side. And, brands that get burnt by influencers, or vice versa, influencers that get burnt by brands, it's tough, because you sever that relationship and there's no more opportunity that can come out of that. But it does take an effort from the brand as well as the influencer to both come together and make a win-win situation. Because yes, you don't want to get taken advantage of being either side of that, but you've really got to be clever about the people you work with, the deals you negotiate, or the deliverables that you promise, because you actually do have to do those things from both sides, the brand and the influencer side. And as you
Yeah.
said, that can lead to many trips, which has
Yeah.
probably created thousands of followers for you, created tons of content for you, and built up your network, like,
Yeah.
quite a fair bit if you've met all of these people on these trips every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's pretty
that's a
great.
big learning as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I've got a few more questions for you here.
Sure.
And I think, you've been doing this for a while, so you're very experienced with building these relationships. And we went over a few ways that people can kind of get started with those relationships. But is there any benefit to being in Los Angeles, for example? So I do get this question a fair bit, is like,
Mm,
does my location matter? Now that everything
yeah.
is remote, everything is online. Does my location of where I live or where I create my content, does that matter?
Yeah. Okay.
What's your opinion?
I would have, before the pandemic, I would have said yes, being in LA is great in a sense that we had such a great network and community, and just like I loved those travel massive events. And they haven't been happening since COVID. They haven't been happening anymore. And I did find that a lot of my friends and colleagues and fellow creators have left Los Angeles because of the pandemic. I'm all alone. They've all been leaving me. But I do think here's the benefit of being in a place like LA. There are a lot of content creators. There are a lot of people in the business, even if it's not just specifically travel. So being in an environment, being surrounded by creatives and creative people and people that are passionate about what they're doing or how they're doing it is always going to be a benefit. So I do think that's one of the plus sides of Los Angeles. And a lot of events do go on in Los Angeles. For example, I can talk about the travel space because that's the one I'm in. In the last 2 months, I've been getting invited to a lot of travel networking events through specific brands or tourism boards that are coming back to LA to say, we're back. Travel is back. I've been to Visit Britain, Visit Sonoma County, Visit Australia in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I've been to events for those, making new contacts, making new friends. So you won't necessarily find that in a smaller town or smaller place where people may live. But the unique side of being in a smaller place, is you can create content that's really niche to that specific location. I have a friend of mine who is a content creator that I met when I did a 2-week backpacking trip through South Africa, and I was connected through a content creator. His name is Jared. Jared, I think it's in CPT or something, but he was really smart because he lives in Cape Town. And he has built his whole brand on being like the Cape Town expert. He realized that there wasn't really anyone on social media that was, an expert in Cape Town. Cape Town is one of the most traveled to desired destinations in the world. So here's a guy who is super smart. He's a travel writer. He's a travel content creator. He's good at photography. He's good on camera. So he really kind of created this niche for himself in that town of being, I'm the expert in Cape Town. I'm a tour guide in Cape Town, all these things. So he was smart to do that. So if you aren't in a city like LA or even in Cape Town, what could you do in your city that makes you stand apart and makes you, whether it is an expert in that city or an expert in a type of thing you do, or even I'm thinking of 2 of my very good friends who are content creators, Wade Holland and Abby. Abby is this amazing, and I don't know if you put links, but I would love for you to link to some of their their content. Abby is a makeup artist. Okay. She does incredible makeup, and she has alopecia. So she talks about alopecia and makeup, and her content is incredible. And her now fiance Wade has incredible content as well. They used to live in Montana. They moved to LA. And if you were to ask them that question, they would say, yes, being in LA makes a difference because it's the energy, it's the opportunity, it's the connections, it's the people you can try and network with that doesn't necessarily exist in other cities like in LA or in New York or maybe even a Chicago.
No, super interesting because I do get that question quite a lot. Because obviously I'm not from LA either, and people
Wait,
ask me
you're
that a
not?
lot.
That's not an LA accent?
It is. It's a Venice Beach accent. Okay, that's great. And then, so, a few things on that as well is, when it comes to, building those relationships, and I know you mentioned the pandemic and everything.
Yeah.
How did that change, like, I know the monetization within the travel space completely changed over
Mhm.
the pandemic. And
Mhm.
so how did those relationships and how did those maybe long-term relationships and the way that you kind of approach travel, how did that change in terms of, monetization or the
Mhm.
type of gigs you were doing, type of work you were doing, the different types of ways that you are now pivoting to generate revenue versus what you were doing before? What sort of
Yeah.
changed over the last kind of 2 years, do you think?
Oof, yeah. Loaded question because a lot changed. And I think in the beginning, it was how to still create content in a way that is respectful, is like conscious of what's going on in the world, and is repurposing travels possibly or repurposing content in a new way. So that was one of the ways. I think then what I realized in the last couple years is a lot of those tourism boards or relationships I had before are going back to the people that they trust. They're going back to the people that they worked with before, and they're bringing them back in for these events. They're bringing them back in to come back to their locations because it's a known quantity, it's a known respected relationship, and I at the beginning of the pandemic, I reached out to a lot to them and said, if there's anything I can do to help you and this destination that I love or this brand that I love, let me know what I can do. Not many of them even said anything, but I think just for them to hear that and recognizing that they're going through a tough time and they were going through a tough time, that means a lot. And it came from a genuine place, and it came from a genuine relationship and respect. And I think in terms of monetization, I think a lot of my monetization in terms of this stuff does come going on these press trips, which didn't happen during the pandemic a lot, or it's going from other avenues of creating content for television or creating content for media that doesn't live on my personal brands. So that's where I was kind of during the pandemic, I was less focused on content that lived on my brands and more focused on content that was living on other mediums or platforms that still needed content. No one's going to my Instagram and saying like, "Oh my gosh, Justin hasn't posted in 2 days or 5 days." But something like a digital platform, like I work on BeondTV where I do travel content. I work for different various platforms. They still need to churn out content. So then working for those people that still need to put out content and shifting what the content actually is where I kind of mostly monetized my income during the pandemic. And now, as we're not out of the pandemic, but the world has opened up in a new way in terms of the travel space and content creation space. I think again, now it's kind of being more opportunities are starting to come like they used to before the pandemic. I keep getting I just literally yesterday, the day before, I got an email from a PR guy that I talked to in 2019 who wanted to send me to Brazil in 2019. And we talked about sending me to Brazil to do an article or an article. I just got an email from him 2 days ago. Hey, it feels good to email you again. I'd love to send you to Brazil 2.5, 3 years later. So it's just kind of that like, okay, here's another example of someone who I talked to 2.5, 3 years ago, remembered me, and then is thinking about me for a week-long press trip to Brazil to go to a wildlife safari in Brazil. So it's like, okay, great. Like that sounds epic, So it's I think we're coming in, or not we're coming out of, but we are seeing in this space the traditional ways of monetization, the traditional ways coming back.
Super interesting that you made the shift to working with brands and identified the brands that needed constant content throughout this
Mm-hmm.
process. Because, yeah, I think with the personal brands, it was a little bit harder. And I did see a lot of people go towards, the Patreons, OnlyFans, that sort of stuff, where they were starting to charge for content.
Yeah.
And then other people went to the brands that still needed content.
Yeah.
And so super interesting how everybody sort of split up and pivoted, because it's
Yeah.
very like it's a make or break moment for a lot of people.
Yes.
This last 2 years. So super impressive how you were able to sort of like pivot so quickly.
Thank you.
Other question is, the other thing is like, that's one of, I think, your best skill sets. You were just so good at building relationships, and you're just like unbelievable at creating like a positive vibe and being liked, I would say. So, what are some tips for people who aren't maybe as good at that, or a little bit shy on camera, or just like aren't good at, building relationships? Is there any tips? Because who knows, you might not have always been like that. You might have developed a skill over time.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, because you haven't known each other since you were a little kid. So I'm sure something's happened since then.
Yeah,
But
well, I
but yeah,
appreciate you. That's very
any
kind of you to
learnings you
say.
can share?
Yeah, I that's very kind of you to say, and I think one thing that I could say, I love people, so I think that's one thing where it starts. I just love connection. I love creating bonds. I love creating experiences. I love creating memories and facilitating that. One of the reasons I love solo traveling around the world so much that I've been doing now for the 16 years is I love walking into a hostel or a destination not knowing anybody, and then after 24 hours almost being like the mayor of the hostel. So that's just kind of like my personality. Is I just love connection, I love relationships. So for people who don't love that, and for people who like recognize, okay, I might not love that, but I know it's an important skill set to have. I think I think the biggest thing for me is being genuine in forming connections for a genuine purpose of connection versus getting something out of it. I think creating a connection where it's like, oh, I'm going to make a friendship or a connection, but it's very evident or obvious that the goal is to get something out of it. That's not going to be a long-term connection or a long-term relationship. I think it really needs to be seeing the person or the brand or whoever it is for actually them as an individual or as an entity, and then first establishing the base, the foundation, and growing that, and then seeing what opportunities may come from it versus going into it like, this is what I'm going to get out of it, boom, 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 boom. Yeah, when it's super transactional, those are the ones I see that aren't as fruitful. The ones that are less transactional in the beginning and then become more transactional are the ones that are the most fruitful for me. And that would be my biggest tip and piece of advice. And if you don't like people and you don't like that, then you have to find a way to do it otherwise. But I can
Yeah.
speak from my personal experience. I'm sure you could have many people on this podcast who find ways to make money through content creation through not connections. My personal experience is most of my work, my successes have been through connections with people and brands, and like we've said, whereas I can't fully speak on people who do it a different way. So that would be a totally different conversation with a different person. And I know there's probably so many ways to make money through blog advertisements and monetization through YouTube videos and ads and all that. My bread and butter is more or less through connections of people versus other avenues.
Yeah, and I think the main learning from that is, be mindful of what your skill sets are and what you're strong
Yes.
at, because, you want to lean into that. And so if you're good on camera, make content that is around cameras. If you're good at writing and suck on camera,
Yeah.
go to the written content. If you like, connections, yeah, definitely build those relationships. If you don't like connections, sit behind advertisements and different monetization strategies. So I think the one thing is, like, if you are getting started, like, list out what your attributes are and
Yeah.
try and focus on, narrowing down your tasks of what you do every day to be beneficial towards those skill sets versus, if you're not good on camera, don't try and blow up on TikTok, because chances
Yeah.
are it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point, is do a little intake of what you're good at, what you are passionate about, and what you know that you can do well, and then figure out where does that line in terms of this content creation world.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Final questions here.
Yeah.
One, if you were getting started right now and you knew everything, but you were starting from scratch, 0
Mm,
followers, everything, what would you focus your time on right now? What would you sort of do to sort of
yeah.
get a following, start monetizing through content creation? What
Yeah.
would be your kind of idea on how to get that
It's
rolling in
I
2022?
I am laughing, Jack, because as you asked me that question, I literally have been thinking about in the last 24 hours that I almost need to repivot myself with this question. I do. And I
Yeah.
think it's because I just see content creation changing so drastically, so quickly, and evolving to this new TikTok kind of form, and who knows, in 2 years we might be having a totally different conversation. So if I were starting from scratch right now, I would be doing TikTok content and Reels content that is like TikTok content, and I would be doing it more in a way that it's all video based and quick, consumable, and always figuring out like what's trending and then how can I put my own spin on what's trending in my own voice. And I tell you that, and I need to listen to myself when I say that, because I need to as well start evolving my content, or else I'm not going to keep getting these opportunities. Most of my content in the past has been, writing or photography or some video content and all that, but it's really, really at a fast pace shifting into this TikTok-esque content world. And who knows where it would go. So yes, I would start by, and I need to, in the next couple of months and weeks, to do this myself, is to be making more TikTok-y, TikTok-y and Reelsy.
Right.
It does not sound. Now I dated myself like I'm an old man, like a grandpa trying to get on TikTok. And that's the thing. Like I remember, 2 years, a year and a half, no, more than 2 years ago, my good friend Jade, Vagabond3, she was like, Justin, get in on TikTok. You need to get in on TikTok. And I just kind of was like, oh, very nonchalant on it. And I actually have a friend of mine from Chicago who, he's a beautiful photographer. He does amazing work. Amazing. His Instagram, he's got like 18,000 followers, and now he's just been focusing on TikTok, and he's been focusing on just like some travel type content on TikTok, and he's up to 80,000 already. And he was even telling me last week, we were having a conversation. He was like, you just need to start making TikTok specific content. And that's the thing, Instagram specific content. And it's hard really trying to make them fit both. So you kind of have to spend the time to figure out, where do you want to invest? It is way more easier right now to try and grow a following on TikTok than it is on Instagram. And that's where I think if someone is starting from scratch, I'm sure you've heard it from someone else before, TikTok is where you want to be putting your time and energy on.
Yeah. And it's always a risk with these new platforms, isn't it? Because new platforms have come around before. Like I remember Periscope and all these other things, and everybody's like, you got to get on this. It's next big platform. And then it dies out to be nothing. So I think
TikTok is here. TikTok's here to stay. Like it's here.
Yeah, I was going to say it's lasted a long enough time for people to be like, okay, this is pretty serious now. So I think it won't be as easy going forward.
Exactly.
To generate a following as easy as it was, let's say over the last 2 years.
Yes.
But it's still going to be easier than if you start in 2 years. So it's always always
exactly. Do you hear that lawnmower? I think that's in my neighborhood. I don't know if that's my neighborhood or yours. I think it's mine. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh yeah, I can see the tree. The blowers are going. Sorry.
You're good. We're just gonna cut your entire second.
Yeah, they're just cut. They're done, and you can see there's a skylight. The light is shifting. There we go.
No, we're not as professional as content.
I know. I'm trying to make here we go. I'm trying to get the lighting a little bit better. Yeah, I should just have held this at me during the whole time, right? Yeah, there we go. Better lighting.
See, I can't even tell if that's good lighting or not.
Well, it's better right now than what it was there. See there, in, out. I don't have a beautiful window. Clearly, you have some good natural light going in on you, or but it's great.
Every wall is just white. It all ricochets. Anyway, so I know we've gone over a lot in this episode, and I think there's a lot of amazing learnings everybody's going to get from this, and I think almost like a deeper level learning than what the surface level of kind of like you were saying, how to create a TikTok or how long it should be or all these little hacks that people try and do. So I think there's a lot more to it than all the stuff that we went over today. But in general, where can we find out more from you, Justin? Where can we start following you?
Yeah.
See what you're up to, engage with your latest projects or whatever it may be. Where's this is your time to direct
this is it. All right, here we go. On Instagram, it is ATW Justin. The ATW stands for Around the World, because my blog is Around the World with Justin.com or atwjustin.com. I do have a TikTok that I need to start investing time into. It's ATW Justin, and I'm being honest, I've been half-assing TikTok, and I need to change that. It's ATW Justin, and then I do have a a professional website, justinwalter.com, that has all of my travel content creation and all my different platforms and mediums on one location. And that's where anyone could find out more about me.
Yeah, well, we'll link to all that as well. And hopefully by the time we get this out, you're at 100,000 TikTok followers.
I mean, the problem is this stuff takes a lot of work, right? And I work in I have a lot of different things going on. So I'm not a full-time like Instagrammer or TikToker where some people are. That's not where I spend my full-time work. So it's finding that balance of all the different platforms and mediums, and then picking and allotting the resource and time and energy that go into all. So I think that's one thing that, a lot of people have to recognize too, is a lot of people you see on Instagram or TikTok, that is not how they necessarily pay the bills. And I think that is something that, yes, a lot of us might get sent on trips or all that stuff, but there's very few people that actually pay their bills full time through working on Instagram and through working on TikTok. So even though you might be looking at your favorite content creators as if they're full-time influencers, it's a lot harder and a lot rarer than you actually think for people to be doing that full time.
Yeah, I think one of the main things from that, which you've done really well, is diversification of your revenue. Like, don't put all of your bets on being a TikTok influencer and making millions of dollars from just creating TikTok content.
Yeah.
You got to think of so many other ways to generate income, and really think of how you diversify the streams of income you have as a content creator, because it's very tough to rely on one stream of income. So you've definitely got to plan out those different streams of income and work on those different streams, continually, because you don't want to rely on just one.
Yeah, which is what you do so well too, Jack.
Try to. I'll be on TikTok soon.
Hey, I told Jen, all you guys need to do is start making a TikTok for you need a dog account with you and the dogs, because everything she posts of you with those dogs is like viral gold.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not very good at creating content. That's the problem.
Oh, maybe I need to move in on that second bedroom in the duplex over there and hire me full time, Jack.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. 2022 is
train your baby to train your kid to be a content creator.
I don't know. Like, I know we've got a few friends who have done that and made their kids.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting. That's a interesting thing. I know I have a lot of kids. I have not a lot of kids. I have a lot of friends who have kids now, and it's really interesting to see how the content creators are either folding their kids into their content or not. So that's a whole other different topic.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to do one on that, because I know you don't like talking about kids though, so I'm not going to bore you with it.
No, I love kids. I just don't love losing my friends to kids. I love
thieves.
Kids are great, and eventually, if I have them, I will learn. I will learn.
Are they going to have TikTok accounts or no?
No. Well, okay. I bet I would be willing to bet a lot of parents check their kids' names on social media to see if they can grab their kids' names on social media before they pick their kid. I wonder, next time you start interviewing content creators who are parents, ask them, did you check to see if your children's names were available on Instagram or TikTok before you named them? It would be interesting to see.
Wow. Yeah, that would be. Yeah. And I know it's definitely a divided opinion on whether you include your kids in your influencer lifestyle or not.
Yeah.
Because, there's some that always have that opinion of, I don't want them to be involved because I want them to make their own choice later on in life if they want to do that or not. Don't force them into it. But interesting stuff. But I know we've got to wrap this up because this episode's getting a little bit long, but we'll maybe do another one on that another time. Justin, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You shared so much with the audience today. I think they're going to get a lot of value out of it. Everybody listening, if you haven't, let us know if you like this episode or if you think that it was rubbish and we shouldn't do these anymore. But I would love to get your feedback either way. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with someone who loves travel. I'm sure they'll get a lot of value out of this. Justin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, we put a bunch of effort into making great content for this YouTube channel. So please hit subscribe, leave us a comment, hit like, and tell a few friends about it.